In this webinar, we're going to dive into 3 different use cases where we are trying to solve global development challenges using location intelligence and using location data. So today we have 3 speakers that I'm really excited to introduce you to. Anna Whitson, Knowledge Management and Communication Specialist at the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. Ricardo Saavedra is the founder and CEO at Visonomy. And finally, we have Luan Xiaopi, the head of ICT at Halo Trust. And I will be moderating. My name is Tyler Bird. I run the community team here at CARTO. So welcome, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you do have a question, you'll see a chat box on the control panel, and you can enter a question at any time, but we'll get to it at the end. So please ask questions. You have 3 experts in global development here to answer them, so don't hold back. So I'm going to give you a little context here about what we're referring to when we talk about location intelligence. So a little background on CARTO. We are a web-based open source location intelligence platform. This basically means we have created a user interface which will allow users to bring data into the platform, visualize the data, and run analysis on this in order to gain new insights from that data. I apologize, the screen share was not on, but here we are now. So these different kind of spatial analyses can lead us to find new things in our data that we didn't know existed before. And this is really important when we're talking about development initiatives, right? So if data is at the center of your initiatives and you have the tools that you need to actually extract value from that data, then you're setting yourself up for evidence-based monitoring and evaluation. You can conduct informed decision-making processes. And now with the availability of different data streams, organizations and governments and companies have the ability to include real-time data streams into their workflows, which will give them more accurate and up-to-date snapshots of the reality on the ground. So oftentimes in development, there's a disconnect between what's happening on the ground and what's happening in the headquarters and in the organizations where decisions are being made when interventions are being planned. So when we're talking about visualizing data, this is a very effective way to tell compelling stories, which can help for advocacy initiatives. This can help make more compelling cases for fundraising, and certainly makes it a lot more accurate when you're reporting outcomes of interventions and different projects. So we're going to cover a few of these and what that actually looks like in the real world and how organizations are actually using these tactics to achieve their missions. One thing to note for those of you who are not familiar with the development industry or the United Nations in general, the SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. So the world convened recently and decided there's 17 main points that we want to improve. And these are basically metrics and goals and objectives that we can help chart and help document our progress in achieving these objectives. So to achieve these goals, right, these are very lofty goals that we have, like ending poverty, right? This is no easy task. So to achieve these goals, this requires a lot of partnerships between governments, the private sector, civil society, and citizens. These partnerships are only going to be as good as the information and data that they're built around. So to successfully address these challenges facing our world, it's going to require an unprecedented amount of data and robust tools to actually put that data to work. So to show you what this actually looks like, today we have 3 different stakeholders who are playing crucial roles in this mission to achieve the SDGs. We have Halo Trust, which is a humanitarian demining charity organization. The Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which works in the United Nations under the UNDP, and Visonomy, which is a private company and design and consultancy firm specializing in spatial data science and online mapping. So first up, we're going to hear from Halo Trust to understand how they've incorporated location data and location intelligence into their mission.
Right, good afternoon or good evening if you are in Europe. I'm based out of UK. And I'd like to give you a brief introduction about who we are. Tyler, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll give you a brief introduction about Halo Trust and who we are. So Halo is the world's largest humanitarian mine clearance organization. We save lives and restore communities threatened by landmines and other weapons of war, such as cluster bombs, stockpiles of small arms, and improvised explosive devices. Quite often, when a war ends or a conflict, the idea comes to mind that this country now will prosper. The people will go straight away, use their land, return to peace. But that's not what happens. After the war ends, land users, mainly farmers, return to their land to find that their land is impacted by landmines and other explosive ordnance. So they will put their life in danger to start using their land, or they will not be able to use their land, which of course impacts the development of the communities. Schools, hospitals cannot be built. We have found ourselves in all countries where we work in over 20 countries and territories, that we are at the forefront of the development to reach those communities. For an example is in Angola, where the polio vaccination had to take place. We had to clear the roads for the World Health Organization to reach the communities to provide the polio vaccination. We also need to clear the ground for a school or a hospital or a health center to be built. And so we not only clear the landmines and explosive ordnance, but also we do the advocacy for the people who have quite often are killed or lost their legs or hands. Sorry for the disturbing pictures, but this is the reality we see. So we pave the way for the development to take place. Now, where does the location intelligence come to play? Well, the landmines are somewhere, and in order to get rid of them, we need to know where they are. So we go out there, we work with the communities, the impacted communities, to gather that information from them and any other available data we have, and we gather that information and put it into our information systems. So the mapping of the ground quite often returns into community mapping. We ask farmers, land users, or authorities that have got development plans. It could be also other development organizations that work in country or in the area, where we coordinate the work. So all this information is collected quite often using pen and paper. Sometimes we would use tablets that where the technology and infrastructure allows it, and all this data is put into our information system so that clearance operations can be planned, but also our partners development partners can be informed where the threat is. We were at the forefront of the short conflict in Georgia back in 2008, we were the first out there to map, to put the threat in a map and then share it with other development agencies. So to know where the problem is, but also to prevent the aid workers going into dangerous or stepping into dangerous areas. But also we use the location so that we can target risk education. We go to schools, we go to community centers, we go to farmers to educate them about the threat so that we can spare lives until we get the resources to go and clear the landmines. And clearing the landmines, getting rid of the explosive remnants of war is a laborious job, and it's also dangerous. So the real heroes in my organization are the men and women who go out there and clear the threat. They kneel in their knees, whether it's cold or it's hot, it's dusty. It's temperatures that I personally would find very difficult to work, but they are there every day finding and disposing landmines and explosive remnants of war. But again, these landmines, these explosive remnants of war, are destroyed somewhere, are taken, away from somewhere, and it's our obligation to record that so that we can tell to the local population, and we can also report to the local authorities, we can report to the development partners that land is now safe so that the development can take place. And we use not only men and women, we use also mechanical assets where possible, where that allows. We do research and development to use machineries so that the operational efficiency is increased. And how does the mapping look like? So, as I say at the beginning, we go out there, and it's really community mapping. We use the kind of simple pen and paper. We use satellite imagery to go out there and collect this piece of information. This information is then transformed into digital maps where we can share it with others. So that piece of paper you saw in the previous screen, you can see now that it is into a GIS system, so that our operations can see and can make decisions on how we deploy, we plan, we go and raise funds for that village or that community to be free of landmines. And also it allows to share this with the world. We find ourselves in places where there are communities that do not exist. Literally, they're not on the map. We have found communities in Angola or in Mozambique or Afghanistan or Somalia that those communities are not on the map, are not in the national gazetteer. So we take these communities, we put them report them to the local authorities, put them on a map, and report the problem where it is. But location intelligence is not only for internal use, operational efficiency, which is very important. We want to provide value for the money to the donors, being it governments, other organizations, or individuals. We have an obligation to increase our operational efficiency and also make our operations more transparent. So here we have an example of using CARTO to put together a dashboard, a nice interactive map where we show to the donor where we are working, what have we done so far for the funding they have kindly provided, and this increases the transparency, but also this increases awareness. This also makes the donor well informed of what we are doing, and also to show the world. This is in southern Afghanistan, for example. The map we have here we see landmines just next to a village, and you can see that the proximity to cultivated land is there. There is a need for that land that is now, contaminated with landmines to be used. And we can show that we are not clearing landmines in middle of nowhere for land that's not going to be used. Is next to houses, is next to cultivated land, and there is a need for the land, and that contributes to development, food security, and also physical security that every human is entitled to. And also, as a donor, we can provide to the level of detail to see particular sites of how it looks like, what has happened even after we have finished the job. Here we have the Kandahar airport, where we have been working and clearing landmines, was just basically next to the airport, next to a city in Afghanistan. The city cannot be developed. The town cannot be expanded without us clearing first the landmines. Also, this reminds me of the early days where we cleared the city of Kabul, where today there are multi-story buildings and businesses flourishing and stuff. So using the location, we can tell the story. We can show what and where we have done. We keep our partners informed, and as well as our donor community. So yeah, we can show that the work we do is in high priority areas where villages, towns are in need for land to expand, or for development projects, or for agriculture. This is also a map that we have built using CARTO, where we see a full picture of the landmine contamination in Angola. And it's one of the very first and few maps that Hello Trust took the initiative to put it together. Now, this map is shared with our partners in the area. You can zoom in and find where this is. And this is not only the kind of mine action sector, this is also shared with the national authorities. It's shared also with development partners. And the end results that we want to see is safe land where people can turn back to their land, use it safely, and we use the location intelligence to increase our operational efficiencies, but also support our development partners in short for development to take place. Well, this is my presentation, and thank you for listening. Tyler, I'll pass the flow to you now.
Great, thank you so much. So next up, we're going to hear from Anna.
Hey everyone, my name is Anna Whitson. I am a knowledge management and communications specialist working at the United Nations Development Program. With our partners at UNDP, we actually support this initiative called the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And I'm going to be presenting a little bit about our monitoring framework and also the dashboard that we co-developed with Visonomy and Ricardo, and also which is based on the CARTO platform as well. So, what is effective development cooperation? I wanted to just kind of go to this level of detail just because it kind of will make a lot more sense about our dashboard and some of the challenges we faced and some of the successes and uses for it if I kind of go to this granular level. So just to say that, oops, sorry, it's not showing. Anyway, it's not showing part of my presentation, but that's totally fine. Just to say that our work is really based around the Sustainable Development Goals, which Tyler noted earlier, a set of 17 goals that were agreed by the international community in 2015. So over the next 15 years, these are the 17 goals that the international community has agreed to work together on. Our work really is mostly around goal 17, which is partnerships for the goals, which really has a lot to do with the way that the world has been changing. It's no longer really a provider-recipient relationship in development, but we have a lot of new stakeholders, including the private sector, civil society, philanthropy, coming into this conversation and really bringing not only financial means, but also technical knowledge and innovation into the fold, because it's a very ambitious agenda. So essentially to be able to achieve this by 2030, which is what we're really looking at, we really need everyone on board. So our work really evolves around these 4 principles that I've listed on the screen. And just to give you a little bit of information around that, this is what we're basically trying to quantify in some way. We use basically quantitative evidence, but also some qualitative evidence. So you can already see that some of these things are rather difficult to kind of measure. So the first one being country ownership, which means the partner country, which is kind of a new term for what we used to call recipients, is fully invested in the cooperation. So that means that they're really driving the cooperation, whether it's financial, technical, knowledge transfer, and it's being determined by their own national priorities. The second really is around multi-stakeholder partnerships. So we want to make sure that all of the activities that are being undertaken are really building on the comparative advantages of all the development stakeholders to reduce, transaction costs and redundancies. The third is a focus on results. So this basically just means that we're basing these development activities on countries' own national plans that should be respected by all development partners. And again, this is really about using countries' own national systems to funnel the financial and technical information through their own systems. And lastly, it's about transparency and mutual accountability, which basically means that information on development cooperation, so whether that's just financial or if it's beyond financial, is publicly available, and that all the development partners, not only the development partners in partner countries, which we used to call recipients and providers, but also the private sector, also the civil society, philanthropy, trade unions, all have a seat at the table and are assessing their cooperation. So you can already see that these are kind of difficult concepts to quantify, like I said, which is why our dashboard is a little bit of a complex issue. Let me go to the next slide. Okay. So this is actually... what is global partnership monitoring? Okay, so the global partnership is a multi-stakeholder partnership which focuses on knowledge transfer around these issues. It's a place for dialogue, but more than that, it's actually a built-in accountability mechanism for assessing progress on the commitments that have been made around those 4 principles. So basically, we've developed 10 indicators to measure progress. It's a biennial multi-stakeholder process that involves governments, but also the other stakeholders that I mentioned. It's a voluntary process and it's country-led. So this process happens every 2 years, and really it's up to the countries to demonstrate their own commitment to effective development cooperation, so to effectiveness partnerships and these 4 principles. Okay, so why do we monitor? It's not monitoring just for monitoring's sake. We really want to track progress, but we also want countries to be able to use the evidence to have conversations with their partners on the progress and the challenges to actually kind of support behavior change and more development impact at the end of the day. So we're really kind of making a foundation for evidence-based dialogue is really what we're looking at. We're not actually looking to name and shame, but we're really trying to make sure that countries have the information they need to have those conversations with their partners. Our framework also feeds into 3 SDG targets. So the Sustainable Development Goals have a set of indicators and targets below them. You can see here the 3 targets. I won't read them out, but basically if a country is reporting to our framework, they have a ready-made source of evidence to feed into this SDG monitoring process that it's also happening. So we try to make sure that this is not a duplicative process, but we're really keying in with the country's own systems and processes that are already in place to reduce the reporting burden on them. Okay, so why data visualization dashboard? We really want to make this the most useful for countries at the granular level. What we had before was really a complete data set at the global level. So we didn't really have disaggregated data. The country would have it itself, but there was a lot of time investment and a lot of burden that came along with kind of assessing the data and making it useful for them to have conversations with their partners. So what we've really tried to do with this dashboard is to provide the disaggregated data that also helps development partners and countries track their partnerships over time and see where further emphasis would be needed. So again, it's really a tool for developing countries to be able to easily analyze where further attention is needed, and to be able to have that conversation with their partners, especially on how progress is coming along. We also want them to be able to compare progress across regions and contexts to facilitate peer learning. So basically what we mean by that is to be able to see how their peers are doing on specific indicators, and to be able to learn from the good practices that are already happening to see where they might be able to kind of learn some good tactics to go ahead and make more progress at the country level. And then last, as we've already kind of discussed, it's to really facilitate dialogue on the progress that's already been made between development partners and also the challenges and where further attention is needed. So this is the data coverage in the last monitoring round. We've had 2 rounds so far of data, so we have quite a limited number of data sets, but there will be data coming in at the end of this year again once we complete our 3rd round of monitoring. So what you see here is that we had 81 developing countries participate in the last round, with more than 125 development partners reporting on the contributions that they provided. So that's not only governments, but also international organizations, UN agencies, philanthropy, they all reported on their cooperation as well. So what you see here is for the 81 countries that we have data on, this represents 89% of development cooperation programmed in those countries, which is over $73 billion. So it is quite a large amount of cooperation that we're covering. I just also wanted to say, I guess I'll hop back to the screen, but just to also say that while we only have 2 rounds of monitoring, we also do have comparative indicators from other monitoring processes. So basically for those indicators that are from a kind of a parent process of our global partnership, we're able to take and see kind of longer term trends because the methodology is basically identical. So for some indicators, we actually do have data back to 2005. So that's how we're able to kind of see trends over time. So you'll see once we kind of walk through the dashboard quickly, that you will see some trends back to 2005. And that's basically why, is because there was basically a parent process that this was born out of, which has some indicators with the same methodology. So quickly, I just wanted to run through the dashboard itself, which we created with Visonomy and CARTO. There's 5 ways in this to actually see the data itself. So the first way to see the data is what we're calling the map viewer screen. So as you can see here, this is basically a choropleth, which is a fun word I learned for a color-coded map, but a choropleth of results for a specific indicator. So you can basically see kind of just a global view of progress for this specific indicator, which is what we're showing here is a % of new development interventions that are drawing their objective from country-led results frameworks, which in English basically means is the donor drawing the objectives of their development intervention from a plan that was considered priority basically by the partner country, so by the developing country. So are they aligning themselves with the partner country's own national objectives? So you can see the progress here. This was our original concept for this dashboard, but really what we came to find out going through this process is that, a few things. One, this doesn't really tell you much about what's happening at the country level. So we needed additional ways to actually view the data and compare the data. And 2, on this map itself, it's a bit difficult for us because not all of our development partners are actually geographical. So we don't have it in this screenshot, but we also have a way to view the development organizations and other multilaterals that are considered partners that don't have, say, a geographical representation. So that's just kind of a lesson learned and something we kind of had to battle with when we were making this dashboard. Another thing is, as you can see here, there are some of the small island developing states that are very hard to show on a map. So that's why we kind of went through and kind of are going to look at the data in some other ways as well, because we don't want to discount some of the small countries that are a little bit more difficult to see visually. Again, this is the map viewer screen right here. Just to show that in the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of see that we're starting to track progress over time, so that, which you can see in a few other ways with this tool, but we're really starting to show kind of how this indicator is progressing over time in a specific country. We also have a pop-up which allows you to look at the results for all indicators which the country reported to. And we also have its country profile, which is this kind of bluish box in the middle, which is more of a contextual analysis. It's actually a PDF document that gives a little bit more analytical analysis on why some of these indicators are the way that they are. So we wanted to make sure, because some of these concepts are very complicated, that we make sure that we have additional context behind it. The second screen, sorry, the arrows kind of got messed up on this somehow, but the second screen is what we call the country comparison screen. So essentially, this is where countries can come and compare themselves against a country that might be in a similar context or in a similar region. So what you can see here is that we have all of the results. If you were able to scroll down on this, you would see all the results for Albania versus all the results for Belarus for a given year. And then you could also compare that against a regional or income level average. So not only by Eastern Europe, but say by lower middle income countries or by middle income countries, so that countries could actually see, who's making progress, who they might be able to learn from, if they're doing better than the average, or if they still have some challenges, which basically makes it possible for them to connect with their peers and learn what they're doing well to make progress. So it's really that facilitation of peer learning. This is basically the other side of that coin. So while the last screen was for developing countries, this is for development partners. So this is for basically the donor side of the community, where they can actually see their progress against other peers. So like I said, development partners encompass not only bilateral governments, but also in some cases the private sector, in some cases UN agencies, foundations, international organizations. So what we are seeing here is UN AIDS, UN agency versus UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, versus the average for all UN agencies. So this is basically just another tool for countries to be able, or excuse me, for development partners to be able to see, how they're doing and compare themselves against their peers. Then I think this is where it actually gets interesting, and I think this is what's the most useful for all development partners, is really tracking this kind of progress over time and really getting down to the disaggregated level. So what you can see here is that we have all performance for Bhutan in 2016. So all of their development partners, how they performed against one another. So basically, we're looking at a specific indicator. We're looking at the percentage of aid that was on the partner country's budget. So for Australia, that was 100% of their cooperation that was funded through the national budget. But say for Japan, it's only 26%. So this is, again, kind of a way for partners to hold themselves accountable, and also for the developing countries to be able to have the conversation, say with Japan or with the WHO, who might not be doing as well, saying, hey, how can we make this metric better, and who can we learn from in order to do that? How can we bring some of these good practices in? So I think this is a really useful tool for countries, because this level of analysis was really difficult before, because this is a huge spreadsheet of data that was difficult for them to really dive into. And when we're visualizing it in this way, it's a lot easier for them to use this as a kind of dialogue mechanism. And then this is kind of the flip side of that again, which is what we call the partner level analysis, was essentially for donors, for development partners, to be able to see all of their cooperation for a given year across all countries in which they, or territories in which they reported cooperation. So for instance, what we're looking here is for the Asian Development Bank in 2016, how much of their funding was dispersed as scheduled. So basically, if they're telling a country when they're going to disperse the funding to them, how much of the time is it actually being dispersed on time? So what you see here is the Asian Development Bank's progress through all of the countries that reported progress here. So you can see is, for instance, they've done really well in Papua New Guinea, but they haven't done as well in Myanmar and Kiribati. So again, it's really holding themselves accountable, and it's seeing where they need to devote further attention and potentially further resources to meeting these challenges. And then lastly, this is what we call the historical performance, which is, again, I think really important for developing countries to be able to see. So this is really tracking the partners' performance over time. So this is historical performance for the Asian Development Bank in Vietnam. So again, we're getting really down to the granular level, but at the country level, this is really what's useful for them, is saying, okay, I'm Vietnam and the Asian Development Bank has done, really well, but in 2005, it dipped down a little bit. In 2007, what can we learn from that? Is there anything that we need to, put back in place to ensure that we can overcome this challenge? It looks like it went back up in 2010. So what can we learn from that? So really, this is a good example of good performance, but there are some examples where the spike is quite extensive. And so those challenges might need to be addressed. And again, this is something that countries can't easily do without a lot of time and resource investment to do this kind of analysis. So the dashboard is actually really helping them, do this in a very kind of clear-cut way so that they can then take this to the discussion they're having with the development partners about the progress and challenges. So how are countries using the results? We don't have to go into this too much, but just to say that countries are really already using this monitoring data to inform their national development plans and also multi-stakeholder forums on effectiveness. A lot of them are actually organizing meetings with all of the development partners, including the private sector and civil society, to assess the results and to see where they can have collective action to really make a difference and push it forward. And again, just wanted to demonstrate that, other than just the raw data, we do have some analysis behind this. In the bottom right-hand corner, this is our global report, which is very useful for showing international trends, but again, doesn't get down to the granular level of the dashboard. And just above that is our country profiles, which we produce, which give the country context and a little bit more about the individual results for a country. So we're hoping to do these again for 2018. So by late this year, very early next year, we should have this information available again, and we'll have an updated data set in our dashboard as well to continue kind of tracking this over time. And then I just wanted to put this up too, because of course, we're happy to take questions at the end, but I would encourage you to check out our website, which links to the dashboard as well, or you can also email us. We're a joint support team between UNDP and the OECD. We're always happy to answer questions. If there are any country governments that are actually on and are interested in learning more about the monitoring process and how to participate, we're actually gearing up to launch the 2018 round this month. So it's a good time to kind of get in on the ground level and to find out how you can participate more. And I think Ricardo, who will be presenting next, is going to touch on some of these issues in the dashboard from a more technical standpoint. So I'm sure he'll address some of those outstanding questions as well. So I will stop there and over to Ricardo.
All right, thanks, Anna. And Ricardo, I'm going to pass the mic to you in just 1 second.
Okay, well, hi everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. So my name is Ricardo, and I lead the team over at Visonomy. We are a data and design consulting shop based in Washington, D.C. And we work quite extensively with CARTO and with various nonprofits, think tanks, and other organizations that do international development. So for my talk, as one of the PMs who led the work on the GPDC dashboard that Anna presented on, I'll touch a little bit more on the technical aspects and also on the opportunity and challenges that organizations have today to create these types of really beautiful and compelling dashboards. So let's see. So I always like to start out with two quick images of how far we've gone so quickly. I first started showing a version of this presentation about like 5 years ago, but really since then things have really ballooned up. So here you see the Papal Conclave from 2005. It's not that long ago. It's about a dozen years ago, and you can see that back then people would just witness an event just by being there and just seeing it with their own eyes. Now, if you look forward, if you look forward just 7 years, in just 7 years, look at all those smart devices that you see. It's really an unbelievable representation of how far we have gone in the last 7 years. And since then, if you were to witness the next Papal Conclave, you'll probably see folks with Snapchat glasses, with augmented reality headsets. It's really expanding exponentially. So that being said, again, we're in Washington, D.C. We work with dozens of organizations, from the World Bank to the World Wildlife Fund, the IDB, National Geographic, Brookings, and all these institutions have the same goal in mind. How do you better communicate your mission statement with your donor community, with the public? How do you generate public support for your cause, whether it is focusing on environmental management or deforestation, or it's providing clean water, or national security? Whatever the cause, location intelligence and creating tools like that are really vital for this. So again, where have we gone and where are we today? Before, we used to do many things through a desktop computer. Since then, things have become more decentralized. We use smartphones, we use tablets to look at websites, to look at dynamic maps, to communicate to people, to collect information. If we look at how navigation has changed, sure, we do a lot of mapping through paper in the international development world, but it's also been transferred substantially to the online world through, again, tablets and smart devices. And if you look at how communication has changed and how information flows nowadays, it's no longer through paper subscriptions of newspapers or magazines. It's now instantaneously through Twitter, through other sorts of blogs, through websites, and you now have a global reach. So your potential to really reach out to an audience has grown like never before, and it has allowed you to do things at orders of magnitude lower in cost than before. And lastly, data. Data has become much more decentralized in the last 10 years or so. It also has become much more publicly available through open data portals. You now can collect data through smartphones, through GPS timestamps, or through imagery from drones or satellites, or from social media websites too. And of course, through these open data portals that allow you to collect information on streets, parcels, elevation, land usage, demographic information, etc. And of course, you also have OpenStreetMap, which is very important. So, okay, so all this is great, but how can it really benefit your organization? How does it really help your cause? Whether you are a nonprofit, a development agency, an on-the-field practitioner, how does this benefit you in the end? One, it helps really highlight your work and build public support, which I mentioned earlier on. Secondly, it also allows you to allocate your resources more optimally, more efficiently. If you have, let's say, information on your staff in various locations, it doesn't have to be in real time, but at least knowing where they are roughly. And how can you better distribute those staff to have a maximum benefit for your cause? Thirdly, how do you collect data more efficiently too, through, again, smart devices? And lastly, how do you put all this data, all this information in a compelling wrapper, mostly through a web interface such as the one that Anna showed you, so that you can very effectively communicate your mission to the public and also to donors, because you really want to build trust and credibility for your cause. And there's no better way to do that than being very transparent through these very compelling images and dashboards. So it all leads to really having the opportunity to leverage open source software, mapping, open data, and visualization. So what does that really mean? Today you have various tools and data sets that allow you to create these types of really amazing dashboards. In the case of what Anna has shown you, we have this website or that dashboard hosted on AWS, allowing you to just pay very minimally the cost for hosting a website. To host the data now, you can use services like CARTO or Mapbox to include that information. You can also leverage CARTO very effectively and very easily too to create, to do very different ways of doing spatial analysis, whether it's finding how many points are fit within a given polygon, how many projects are within a given area, etc. And you can do visualizations through dynamic graphics, all of which are provided through open source, such as D3JS. So here we're going through two very quick case studies of what we have done as a company at Visonomy to help promote these types of tools. One is through our work with the World Bank. Again, we work quite extensively with the World Bank in various sectors, whether it's transportation or disaster risk management. In this case, we helped build a survey collection tool and a mobility detection tool for the city of Buenos Aires. Well, what's going on right now, as in many cities, is that to collect information on how people are moving across the city or the transit agency would send hundreds of people in person, door to door, to collect information on where that person goes to work often, what area, whether they own a bicycle, whether they ride the subway quite frequently. They also collect generic profile information. All that requires a lot of time and, in the end, a lot of money that a lot of these agencies don't really have. So how can we better scale this operation up by creating some kind of system? And that is exactly what we did, where we helped build, or we actually built, an Android and iOS application that helps collect the GPS data points from users who are willing to participate, and it anonymizes those GPS points, and it allows the government to create origin destination maps on how those people are moving. And when needed, because each user has generic attribute information such as gender, age, economic status, the government can send geo-targeted or attribute-based surveys to those people to their Android devices. So no longer do they have to send hundreds of people to these locations. It can all be done at scale, and as a result, you have a much richer picture of how people are moving across the city. Now, one key insight has been why do women ages 25-34 prefer to take the bus rather than the subway? And we've learned that it was through because of safety, and we found that out because of these surveys that were sent out to this particular demographic. So what you see in this page down below is a simple screenshot of the Android application and also a desktop interface of what the government can access to then send a survey to a group of people. And so here we go. Here is a quick output of what these GPS points translate to. And very quickly, I will showcase this right now through the CARTO visualization tool. Again, what happened was we were able to export data as a CSV, as you can see here. It's very common across most organizations, obviously. And simply through a drag and drop in CARTO, where you can just log in here, we simply just drop this data set. It loads very quickly, and all of a sudden you have this dashboard here, which allows you to basically slice and dice your information as needed. Here you can see whether or not, here you can filter out profiles based on whether a person works or not, whether they are single or married, whether they study. So there's various ways in which you can slice and dice this information very quickly. And as you can see here, it's like Microsoft Excel, but for maps. So going back to the presentation, so that was one of two examples. The second case study I'd like to highlight also is the one we did with Anna and her team, where we really wanted to very effectively engage the public with all this rich data that was being collected at a global scale. So what we did was, again, we leveraged as much as possible open source software, as well as the CARTO dashboard to host all this data. And we developed the web framework, the graphics that you saw from Anna, all that was done through open source software in a matter of months. And as a follow-up to this dashboard too, the way it works in CARTO is basically you just you have a Dropbox-like or a Dropbox-like portal where you can see all your files. You basically just drag and drop. From there, you can just open up any one of those files, whether it's a CSV or a shape file, and then you're able to modify that data set as needed. So it's very quickly, and it provides a good example of how you are now afforded a breadth of tools from the very simplest of dashboards to the most customized and complex dashboards that you just saw with Anna. And right before I conclude this, one of the challenges that we often have with these types of projects is we are just so eager sometimes to develop a dashboard that sometimes the data sets are not there yet. And that is one example of, that has been our work in Sri Lanka, again, with the World Bank, where through typical procurement processes, we actually started the project back in July of last year, and we are now in June, and we have yet to receive about 90% of the data. So that is a very typical use case that we find, and one way just to smoothen the process of creating these types of dashboards is just having your data ready before initiating any type of dashboard, and it will help facilitate this stage much easier for you. So that being said, again, I'm very excited to have showcased all this information with you guys, and I'm happy to take any questions later on. So thank you very much.
So that concludes the presentations. Thank you to Halo Trust, Visonomy, and the Global Partnership for Effective Development Corporation. We really appreciate you all joining us and sharing your work with us. There's a lot of lessons to be learned here.